So the critical point to me, Tim, is that if we don't solve the fundamental cost issue, we will be forever reliant on state and federal policy. If we can get the costs out of the way, we have an open market, we can invest in our businesses, we can grow, really unleash this over the next 10 years. But if we don't, it's going to get worse, not better, because you've still got to get through net metering in all these other states, and who knows what will happen in Washington.
Are you speeding the energy transition? Here at the Clean Power Hour, our host Tim Montague bring you the best in solar, batteries, and clean technologies every week. Want to go deeper into decarbonization? We do too. We're here to help you understand and command the commercial, residential, and utility solar, wind, and storage industries. So let's get to it. Together we can speed the energy transition.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 8 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more. It's not often that we here in the U.S. really think long and hard about what's going on in other markets. But there are other solar markets globally that are further along than we are in the US. The cost of solar in Australia is $1 a watt. And we're going to be geeking out on what is going on in other places and what could be going on in the United States to half the cost of DG solar, resi and commercial solar. If we halved the cost of solar, what would that mean for your business? It would mean going from 5 to 50% of grid power in the next 10 years, potentially. So this is a real opportunity. My guest today is Andrew Birch, otherwise known as Birchy. He is the co-founder and CEO of an amazing platform called OpenSolar, which is used by installers in residential and commercial solar. It's free for everyone. And we're going to talk about that a little later on. But first, I give you Andrew Birch. Welcome to the show, Birchy.
Thank you very much, Tim. Nice to be on.
So, as we have been discussing, there's a lot to discuss, but what I wanted to start with, you got into solar in 2002. So you've been on this journey for more than 20 years. You're from the UK originally, which I did not know. You're Scottish by birth, but spent time in the US and Australia, and you got into the solar industry when you were living in Australia. And if you're listening and you don't know this, Australia is further on the path. The penetration of PV in Australia is what, Birchy?
33%.
There you go. We're nipping at maybe 5% at best here in the United States, right? They have achieved 33% penetration in the Australian market. Now, granted, Australia is a small place, relatively speaking. The population is relatively small, but nonetheless. So I think that it would be great to set the table here with what is it that Australia is doing that has led to this high penetration, and also you're living now in the UK and you have a lot of knowledge of the European market, and I'd love to hear what's going on in Europe. But start with Australia, Birchy, if you would. What was it that got your attention with PV?
Yeah, so I mean, PV to me is just, always been this very beautiful technology in so many different ways. The simplicity of it, the democratization of it as a solution, the economics of it. It's just a simpler, better way of delivering energy. And that was my kind of driver, 20 plus years ago. That what, is I think relevant to this question of Australia and where we are relative to the States is how simplicity of the hardware and the technology can be broken by the lack of simplicity in how you sell and design and install solar. So, it's got this beautiful attribute as a modular technology that it can be installed, in any size and scale. And the opportunity for it to be, installed at point of use of energy on people's homes and businesses has always been what I've been super passionate about. And what you've seen in Australia is if you make the sales process efficient, if the kind of government and bureaucracy and red tape, frankly, get out of the way, then what you end up with is $1 a watt residential solar. So a 7 kilowatt system costs $7,000 in Australia today. That same system's $3.40 a watt in the United States today, which incidentally is the same price it was on average 7, 8 years ago. So like we've gone nowhere despite the fact that panel prices have gone down 90% because of all these other costs that you have in the United States relative to the Aussie market. So because it's $1 a watt and you can, pick up a phone, go online, order your system, and it can be installed the next day or the next week. You've got very fast customer uptake, super low costs, and as a result of all that, 33% penetration and a really successful kind of thriving Aussie solar market.
I mean, it's pretty much common sense. If you make the process of installing the equipment easier, it means that consumers will adopt the technology. It's not rocket science, right? And here in the US, one of our challenges is that we have so many AHJs, authorities having jurisdiction, right? Every state has their own programs, own rules. Every jurisdiction has their own rules. And so if you're an installer, you're swimming in code and swimming in unique AHJ requirements, and that is just a huge headache. I mean, here in the US, when you say you can order solar and get it installed the next day, we just roll our eyes and go, what? Like, that just sounds crazy. Because here, we're lucky if you could get solar installed within a month, like literally, right? That would be very, very fast.
Yeah, that's as fast as you can go. And it's up to 6 months still, in parts of the country. So Tim, like, some of your listeners might know, but I was the CEO and founder of Sungevity, which was one of the leading US solar companies for about 10 years from 2007 to 17. And so we've got direct experience. We sold about a third of our systems in Europe and Australia, and 2/3 were in the States. So we had the income statement of each business side by side in front of us. So we had a pretty unique perspective back then of what the cost components are that are fundamentally driven by permitting. So it's the direct costs, as you mentioned, you've got this back and forward that takes, anywhere from 1 to 5 or more months to process. And all of that means truck rolls, visits to the actual HJ to physically deliver, organizing customer visits, and obviously customers cancel and move dates. And so you need a whole function that costs money to organize the process that delivers the permit, in addition to actually generating the permit. As you said, each individual AHJ has their own kind of interpretation of the state electrical code, and each state's got a different electrical code. So you've just got this kind of mass of confusion and friction and expense, and all of that increases other costs because if you have a 60-day installation cycle, then the customers cancel. We find that customers cancel about 1% a day. So if you install it the next day, cancellation rates in Australia and Europe are like 1 or 2%, but typically you're still seeing cancels from contracts signed of 20 to 30% in the States today. So that increases the acquisition cost. And all of that ends up adding up to a huge amount of work and that $3.40 a watt.
And you're truly suggesting that it's 3x more expensive to install residential solar in the US than in Australia.
That's absolutely right. Like we have the data. We've got a third of US contractors are using OpenSolar today to design and sell. We don't share any individual information and data, obviously, but we know at the aggregate level by state what the prices are. And we know the same. We're over 50% share in Australia. So that's the real data today.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's crazy.
So we Americans, we have to rise up. We have to have a sense of urgency. We have to support initiatives like SolarAPP, and we're going to talk about that. That's a joint venture, for lack of a better expression, right? A collaboration between the DOE, SEIA, and others, to speed the permitting process, to make a platform that makes it easier for AHJs and installers. And what I've heard is the implementation is going very slowly here, unfortunately. The app has been in the wild, the Solar app has been in the wild now for a couple of years, but it's not getting a lot of traction, unfortunately. But what else about the Australian market, I guess, Birchy, before we move on, is different? You mentioned, okay, you can just order it and get it installed. So the permitting is the permitting universal across the country?
Yeah, there's different interconnection rules and processes for the utilities by region, but there is a completely standard process across the country. If you're installed by a certified installer, you chuck it on the roof.
Yeah. And I mean, the technology is the same, right? It's
same hardware. Yeah, exactly.
It's very mature technology, right? We've had solar for 70 years. So there's nothing fundamentally different about the technology. The vast majority of the solar panels are made in Southeast Asia. You are a little closer to Southeast Asia, so maybe you can get panels at a cheaper price than we can here in the U.S. But what else would you like to highlight, I guess, that's different about Australia and also Europe than the U.S.?
So you've got the permitting is the absolute biggest chunk of it. Like that is the source of the absolute majority of that cost difference. Other factors that are worth mentioning, you now got 60% tariffs as of the last couple of days on Chinese panels coming into the United States. So you buy a panel for 10 cents a watt in pretty much most countries around the world now, but you're paying you're paying a lot more than that in the States these days. And then you've got some building code stuff, metal conduit and some of the other code issues that are different in the States that add to the cost of goods sold. But that's maybe, 40, 50 cents. The fact is that if everyone implemented SolarAPP, if every state did it, or if the federal government said, look, we're just going to have a standard instant automated permit that is implemented across the country, you would get to, we think, about $1.50 a watt. So you wouldn't get to $1 a watt because of those other code differences and tariffs, but $1.50 a watt would more than halve the cost of solar to American consumers.
Right. And in our pre-interview, you mentioned the Telecommunications Act that sped the expansion of wireless, was it wireless telecom or wireless broadband here in the U.S.?
Yeah, broadband receptors, basically it was about satellite dishes. So if you go back to the early 90s, you used to have to go and get your AHJ to approve putting a satellite dish up. The federal government decided in its wisdom that communication technology was incredibly important and that there needed to be, automated ability for consumers to access the internet and put a dish on the roof. And so they just, put it into the Federal Communications Act, I think it was 1996. And it was done. And so what's interesting, which you've heard me say a couple of times recently, it's a hell of a long shot. Who knows what Trump and Musk's real prerogatives are underlying some of these crazy headlines. But if they wanted to halve the cost of solar energy for American consumers, they could enact an automated permitting act. So they could do the equivalent for dishes, satellite dishes for solar panels and EV chargers and batteries. And that would overnight halve the cost of solar and be very powerful.
So legislation matters, right?
Legislation matters.
There is such a thing as good government. It's not all the deep state. That is a bunch of hogwash, right? The government is the foundation for the good society that we have. You need a foundation to give us access to education and healthcare and roads, transportation, and yes, solar. And so there is definitely a role, despite what you see going on in America today in 2025 politically. Let's talk a little bit about Sungevity. Talk about the birth of the company and then the rise and the fall.
So the birth of the company was really just this realization that software could create a lot of efficiency in selling, designing, and project managing solar. So we created a B2C company. It was the brand, obviously, was Sungevity. We sold solar energy solutions directly to end customers in the US and Europe and Australia. And the idea was that we could use technology to make it cheaper and faster and easier. So we were the first to do what we called remote solar design, the first in the industry globally to use satellite and aerial images to design solutions and send online quotes to customers. That was the kind of big innovation. We then introduced finance, which, with hindsight was added a whole lot of complexity and ultimately led to the end of the company because we were one of those businesses like SolarCity and Sunrun who were offering leases, monthly pay, zero down solar in that kind of online selling solution. So the company grew massively. We were top three residential solar company in the States. And as I say, a third of the business on top of that overseas. We were going public in just during the Hillary Clinton Donald Trump election, so Trump V1. And unfortunately, the Trump outcome was not what the market expected. It's not what we, the banker leading the IPO expected. There was immediately a tariff on solar panels, but more importantly for us, it froze the finance market, which is you're seeing a version of that here today, where the uncertainty of what the tax rules will be, freezes the amount of capital that you can get. And when you're selling a lot of solar leases, that's ultimately what led to the end.
Gotcha.
And Tim, if I may, like just the thing, if I could just share, like I spent a quarter of my life doing solar in the States, and I'm really passionate about this. I put a lot of my personal time and energy and money even into SolarAPP and the solution. Fundamentally, we have to realize that the market is broken. It's really hard to see it when you're on the ground in the States selling and installing because you're so used to doing it the way you've been doing it forever with permitting. But if we can just break through and see that every other country in the world has solved this, where you don't have a 2 to 3 month AHJ-driven permitting process, you just have a piece of paper or an online form you complete in an hour or less, and you can go and get that system purchased and put onto the roof. And life is so much better. You can all build much bigger businesses. The market could be 6, 7, 8, 10 times as big as it is today if we solve this.
Exactly. Yep.
So it's like we have to kind of like prioritize it, and we don't have an industry association that's prioritizing it because it's focused on utility scale solar because it's 90% of US solar today is utility scale. So we've kind of got to stand up as a distributed industry, as a resi commercial industry and say, right, we need to solve this. And you mentioned SolarApp's been slow to deploy. It has, it's nearly 8 years now since I started it with, the help of Billy Parish at Mosaic and Lynn Jurich at Sunrun. It's taken a long time, but there are national companies today in the States that are doing about a third of their sales on SolarAPP. In California, we've now got legislation and it's becoming a really big part of the California mix now. So it is happening, but it's just taken an awful long time.
That's heartening. I'm glad to hear this. When you look back at the last 2 years, there's been a lot of blood in the water in the solar industry. A lot of big solar companies have gone bankrupt or exited the market. I'm curious, what is your analysis of particularly the residential solar market in the US, and what are your cautionary words for solar installers who are ambitious and trying to grow and get bigger and operate in multiple markets?
So globally, very quickly, globally first, I'm incredibly bullish and optimistic about what solar is going to do for the world. And you've done this maths, we'll maybe come back to on how we can get to 50% of global energy from solar in just the next 10 years. When the caveat is when the market is allowed to flourish and thrive in an open, free market for energy.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, America right now is suffering from the worst bureaucracy and the least open market for distributed energy that I know of globally. And so the problem is we're reliant, unfortunately, the maths is simply when you have this extra cost, because there are 16,000 jurisdictions and $2 a watt of extra work you got to do. When you're at 340 a watt, the math versus retail electricity prices is you need a 30% tax credit and net metering to make the math work meaningfully well. And so we're permanently, as an industry, all these small businesses, all of us operating in this industry, have this guillotine hanging over us, which is what are the federal government going to do, or this new administration going to do with the ITC? And what is my local government, my state government going to do with net metering? And what you saw in California is, when the utilities and it was actually the utilities and the unions get together and sort of fight against distributed solar.
Right.
They cut the net metering, taxed it, and we saw a 60-70% drop in that market, and tens of thousands of jobs lost. Like criminal, horrible. So the critical point to me, Tim, is that if we don't solve the fundamental cost issue, we will be forever reliant on state and federal policy. If we can get the costs out of the way, we have an open market, we can invest in our businesses, we can grow, really unleash this over the next 10 years. But if we don't, it's going to get worse, not better, because you've still got to get through net metering in all these other states, and who knows what will happen in Washington.
Yeah, so let's put a pin in this on net metering and tax incentives. Do those play a major role in Australia and Europe?
No, so I think there's two major countries I know of that have net metering today, and then the remaining US states, the Netherlands and India. I think Pakistan also has a version of net metering, but in Australia, there's gross metering, so you're basically getting wholesale prices for your energy, and you're incentivized therefore to have a battery. So solar plus a battery is now a completely autonomous economic solution for your average homeowner. And yes, so net metering, when the utilities lose control of that, because you're just now acting the same as everyone else on the grid, you take the power from them. You're able to grow, autonomously without they're ripping the sheet underneath you.
So I love this. What I hear you saying is, it's cool, people. We can relax about net metering. We have to lean into higher attachment rates of storage, peanut butter and jelly, solar and storage. I know you don't eat peanut butter and jelly in Australia or the UK, but here in the US, it's a very popular food for children. But that immediately brings up the question of the price of storage. How do you overcome that? Because you take your average solar project, say $25,000, $30,000 in the US, and you add storage, and it's all of a sudden $45,000, which becomes a tougher nut to crack. I'm just curious, how do you solve that problem?
Well, so if you get away from the permitting and you get back to international standard pricing, then you're actually at $7,000 for the solar and another $2,000 to $3,000 for the battery. So for $10,000 in Australia, you have a system that allows you to generate that power, charge the battery during the day, and discharge when it's needed at night. And the economics of that are you're basically avoiding that 30-cent retail price with the battery. So the economics of this battery suddenly are very attractive because you've got such high energy prices you're tapping into.
The cost of energy, how does that compare in Australia versus the US?
So retail rates, you're at about 15 cents. I think 14 cents on average across the states. Obviously, it's a big variance between
East, West,
Hawaii,
Central.
California, East, West, exactly. But you're in Australia, probably 25 to 30 cents, so high retail price, but quite low wholesale prices, 5, 6 cents wholesale. So with a battery, it's the same in Germany, it's the same in the UK. There's an 80% attachment rate for solar in the UK now because there's an open market and you're incentivized. I basically have a battery here at my house. I consume power from the grid to charge the battery between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. for 5 pence per kilowatt hour, about 7 cents per kilowatt hour. And I'm avoiding retail during the day at 30. So the battery math works when you let the market work. It all comes down to, I think overarching thesis is we need an open market, a transparent open market.
It's so ironic, right? The US is such a big fan of this unregulated economic model, right? And yet we're so constrained by our bureaucracy. And I'm just curious. I don't want to go too far off the path of the discussion, but is Elon Musk and Doge going to be the answer, do you think?
So I don't know what his personal motivations are now. If they are still that the electric revolution is critical to the success of humanity, and that Tesla's a really important part of that, then yes, he should absolutely focus on this. So, kind of a fun story. I got a hold of his personal email from a former colleague who used to be a senior person at Tesla. And I wrote to him when the Doge appointment was announced, and one in a million shot, but just said, look, in two lines, you could halve the cost of solar in America overnight with federal policy to automate permitting. And I know that he is aware of this fact because I know that he visited Tesla in Australia, was shocked that the price of solar was $1 a watt. He thought it was a mistake when his team were giving him an update when he went to Australia to launch the Giga battery out there. If you remember that bet he had with Mike Cannon-Brookes, the Australian billionaire, that I can put a Giga battery in by the end of the year or I'll do it for free. Do you remember that?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So
that was a very audacious bet that he made.
That was awesome.
And he delivered.
He delivered it. Yeah. It was incredible. Absolutely incredible. And that Aussie team delivered that. And it's been a huge success. But at the launch, he realized that permitting in Australia is so simple that, yeah, the costs are a third of the American price. So he's aware that it can happen. He even reposted something that WA was over 50% residential solar, Western Australia. And he's like, this is the future. So he's aware of it. It's just whether amidst AI and power trips and all the other stuff going on, whether it'll get on his agenda or not.
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic, because we're down 25%, as a market in the last 4 years under a Democrat administration who had, high hopes and aspirations, who believed in climate and were progressive on a lot of these issues. But we're down. The fact is we're down 25%. So ironically, long shot, but, if the Republicans fix this, then it could be transformative for distributed energy.
Yeah. There is hope. There is hope that the Trump administration could do something really good. Right now, they're causing a global trade war, which I don't see that as being a huge benefit to the American economy, but only time will tell, I suppose. The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 8 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more. I do want to revisit this topic, though, of the solar industry. So many Chapter 11 bankruptcies, SunPower, ADT, Titan, Texas Solar, Pink Energy. I mean, the list goes on and on. And I in my conversations, the signal that rises to the surface is twofold: greed and mismanagement. That's certainly the case with SunPower, mismanagement. They hired an executive, I think, from Amazon, who knew nothing about the solar industry. Like, what are you guys thinking? But I'm curious, what is your analysis and what is your advice, more importantly, to my listeners, many of whom are residential solar installers, resi and commercial? What is your advice to how to grow a sustainable solar business?
The honest answer is I think the US is an incredibly hard place to do business. Like all the people I know, and hundreds of great friends and colleagues and partners over the years in resi solar. And, it's just a tough, low margin, very complex business. And it's really hard to scale because every jurisdiction is different from the next. So the moment you become a multi-jurisdiction selling installation business, you've got a lot more that you have to deal with, a lot more bureaucracy and overhead, which just doesn't exist in other countries. So to me, the kind of advice is, we need to simplify both the industry and our businesses. Unfortunately, because the costs are so high, you have a very high preponderance of the need for finance. And because of the nature of the ITC structure, the finance becomes quite complicated. So getting access to simple finance solutions is critical, and just being really careful about growth because of the complexities that come from permitting. And fundamentally, like as an industry, if all the CEOs and everyone listening to your podcast can rally around SolarAPP and permitting and solving that once and for all, then there's nothing stopping us going to 30-40% penetration and building really big, successful businesses, across the country to deliver this technology.
So let's talk about OpenSolar. What is it that you have built at OpenSolar, and what does it, I guess, what is the problem that OpenSolar solves?
So it's another part of this inefficiency of managing a business we're trying to solve for, of all the paperwork and bureaucracy and truck rolls and phone calls and just work you have to do to process a customer through a lead to an install and beyond. So OpenSolar is a software platform. We've taken all our experience in the US market and other markets around the world, and we've built what we and I think our users think is the best software solution to operate your business on, from managing leads to designing using all the AI and design automation that we've built, which is really the kind of one of the core pieces of the technology that we were the first in the market to launch, 16, 17 years ago. So that design tool supports all the customer journey. The customer proposal and sales kit is second to none. So in one place, you can basically manage your system, manage your customer, sell, contract, project manage, procure hardware in many countries, use our payments tool to collect cash and manage your invoicing. All of that in one place and all completely free. That's the value prop, so that you can be efficient as a business to scale, which is what we all want for the industry.
And how do you make it free?
So really a genuine win-win. It's a wonderful model. Basically, you have free to the contractor, free what we call the solar professional, the solar pro, for everything, always free. And we have these sponsors, these service providers who basically pay our bills. So for example, we integrate finance so that we can offer that to the pros. The pros can access zero down solutions to solve for that inefficiency we talked about, and we get paid a tiny clip from the finance provider. We've got over 100 manufacturers who support the app with sponsorship by paying us and supplying all their PDF and video content and marketing collateral. And we've got relationships with distributors and other service providers that basically pay to make the app free to their customers, the pros.
And is it truly open though? In that you allow competition within segments. Let's say solar finance.
Yeah.
Can
totally
any solar finance company get on the platform?
Yep, any finance company can get on. You choose which one you want to use. Same with manufacturers. Even if they don't sponsor the tool, all their core information is still in the database. So you can design and sell with manufacturers of whoever you want.
Very cool. And just walk us through, I'm looking at the partner tab. So go to opensolar.com, check out the partner tab. You'll see many equipment manufacturers that you recognize there. SolarEdge, Solus, SunPower, SunTech, Canadian Solar, Fronius, Nearmap, Longi, Iron Ridge, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Excuse me. What does it take if you're a service provider or manufacturer to get on the platform?
It's pretty simple. It just gives a ring and we get you on. It's all very standardized now. And we just want to have all, the big efficiency win that we see in OpenSolar, the software is great, saves you a lot of time and money, increases your sales yields, just basically increase the scale and profitability of your business. The other thing that's really valuable though is the connectivity. So in one place, you can now access all the finance providers, you can access all the manufacturers. And increasingly, we're going to add other services like hardware ordering. So you can get at all these places and get at all these products and services in one place. So big efficiency win. That's kind of the big value driver we see.
Very cool. Is there anything else that our listeners should know about OpenSolar?
Yeah, I mean, I just think this. So we're going to be launching some cool stuff later in the year around electrification. So we're kind of taking it from just solar and storage to the full electrification journey. We're so excited to announce some of that later this year. We're doing a lot of AI-driven automation. So ultimately, we can kind of see a world where the pros, these incredible small businesses that are really leading the industry, are able to focus entirely on the customer and the installation so that we're doing all the paperwork and the processing and the ordering and helping with AI kind of manage a lot of that workflow just to free up people to spend more time with customers and maybe even more time with their families on a Friday afternoon. Who knows?
Yeah, I like to say that we knowledge workers are just bot wranglers now. That is becoming a job, being a good bot wrangler. I use several platforms every day now in my work, and I can't imagine not having them.
Mm.
Perplexity is my favorite search engine now, and Claude is my favorite content modification platform. But I'm curious about how you see resi versus commercial. You know, in the US, the commercial market has lagged quite a bit behind the residential market, and we've already discussed there's a lot of challenges for residential solar. The challenges are different in commercial. I think there's a huge opportunity there. There is kind of a wave of installers coming into commercial now, leaving residential with changes like you mentioned with NEM 3.0 in California. And we have a lot of runway. When you fly into a major metro in the United States, you see all those big flat commercial roofs that all could have solar arrays on them, and only a tiny fraction do. But how do you see that, and is OpenSolar going after the C&I market?
Yeah, so we support a CNI on the platform. Vast majority of our users do some commercial, usually in the smaller scale, sub megawatt kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm incredibly bullish about the commercial market. I totally agree. The roof space issue is an opportunity is massive. In a lot of other countries, what we're seeing because of the success of solar, is that there's quite a bit of pushback on land use as sort of one of the public matters that surface in the media against solar. And so I think this real enforcing of the potential for commercial roof space and residential roof space as the answer to that as we scale is really, really important. We've done some work with Google at OpenSolar, just analyzing roof space in some parts of the world. Most recently, we looked at the UK, and the UK has enough roof space to power the entire country of the United Kingdom, with frankly the worst. I'm looking out the window now, and I can validate that it is the worst weather you can imagine. But even with that problem, we can get 300 gigawatts of solar on roofs here in the UK, which could power the entire nation.
Yeah.
So yeah, commercial and residential both to me are economically smart and just the right systematic solution for the future of energy.
Yep. Yeah, we some of my listeners will know the statistic. We get 5 to 10,000 times more photonic energy landing on Earth every day than we could actually use. So we could power society many times over. We've already paved over 6% here in the US, 6% of the landscape with the built environment and roads, cities, buildings, etc., right? So we just need to take 1 to 2%, and that includes the existing built environment and some greenfield. It's a both and. We need utility solar, we need distributed solar. It's a both and. But we're not going to pave over the breadbasket, people. So just let's
Yeah,
put that to bed. That is not a concern.
100%. There's another one for you. There was a study I saw that Stanford did, which said 2% of all land mass is used by the fossil fuel industry today. So and our math at Open Solar is we need 1% to power the entire economy of 4 times with 4x growth in electricity demand from solar. So the math is kind of obvious. Yeah, we don't have a land problem.
Yep. So what are some other big problems that you think about? You and I talked about, for example, the fact that we could net zero our economy and still have a major climate crisis on our hands, right? 50 gigatons is net zeroing the economy, removing that pollution from the economy. We're at 450 ppm by the time we do that in about 2050, if we're good. We're not necessarily on the good trajectory today, but we could totally do that. there's legacy carbon in the atmosphere that needs to be removed, 1 trillion tons of it. But what are the big picture problems that you think about, Birchy?
Well, it's maybe worth talking about this S-curve model that we just released a couple of weeks ago, because what I keep this model of the solar industry and the future of energy and kind of geek out on it a bit. But what it's showing me right now is if we carry on growing at 25%, our annual solar installation number, which is just under 600 gigawatts in the last 12 months, then between 2025 and 2035, we go from 5% of energy from solar to over 50%. That's like that compounding effect finally kicking in.
Mm-hmm.
So as we talked about in our earlier conversation, Tim, like what that means is you've solved over half the climate, the ongoing climate challenge of CO2 emissions in just 10 years, which amidst all the doom and gloom of, the political landscape and environmental challenges today is a really like encouraging thing if we focus in on the policies that we need to deliver that 25% growth, like, for example, automated permitting in the US. And what that S-curve then does post 2035 is it kind of smooths out and hits, something like 70-80% solar, with the rest coming from wind and nuclear and hydro. So it's a zero carbon world. But as you say, unfortunately, there's still all that carbon in the sky, and we're stabilizing in our math at about 445 parts per million. So there's still a ton of climate risk, even in that happy scenario.
So I assume when you talk about the S-curve, I mean, okay, there is this phenomenon in technology adoption, for example, right? And it's related to the cost adoption curve. Is that the fundamental phenomenon that you're referring to, though, the cost adoption curve, that as prices decline and consumption goes up, prices continue to decline faster, there's a positive feedback there, and that catapults you into vertical growth?
Exactly. This feedback loop, this simple, very well understood, very proven feedback loop of what has been 15% per annum cost reduction since 2000 and 34% growth, are perfectly intertwined. Every cost reduction drives another incremental, customer who can afford and should go solar. So that cycle has driven very, very consistent growth. And yet the energy analysts all forecast a much more spreadsheet conservative view of suddenly we're going to go from that very consistent high growth to overnight we're going to go to 2, 3, 4% for the next 10 years. And if you believe that, then you believe the report that came out on the weekend from Vitol, one of the largest oil traders in the world, that we'll still be consuming as much oil in 2040 as we are today. And that's the mainstream consensus. So what I'm saying is, if you believe in continued growth of solar, i.e. you believe in the learning curve, which is incredibly easy to believe, like it's just such a proven fact, then the logic statement is you will hit 50% solar by 2035, and fossil fuels will be in deep decline in the 2030s.
Yeah. Yeah, that is I totally see that happening. We have the technology, and there's lots of money flowing into the wealth transfer. This $100 trillion of wealth transfer that Jigar Shah refers to is happening. That is a very good thing. And I encourage you, listeners, if you're in solar, lean in, go harder, do solar and storage. And if you're not in solar yet, talk to me and talk to your friends in the solar industry, because you have 30 years of pure growth ahead of you. Unlike fossil fuels, there will be an industry, but it's going to be a waning industry. So Birchy, in our last few minutes together, let's talk more about what professionals in the solar industry can do to support SolarAPP and other initiatives like that, because I think it is fairly amorphous. We're in the trenches. If you're an installer, you're busy, right? You're focused on your sales, your marketing, your installation, making your machine more efficient and getting projects done. That is a full-time job. But we also have to pop our head out of the hole like a prairie dog sometimes and go, wait a minute, what's going on and how can I be part of this bigger landscape? Because there is an important landscape there, like getting SolarAPP instituted in your AHJ. So I'm curious, what is your analysis of what installers and our industry? And you mentioned SEIA and their focus on utility solar. do we need an additional industry organization or a separate, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, because it's sort of self-fulfilling, because SEIA represents the solar industry ostensibly, and because utility solar is 90% of all US solar right now, because distributed has been so held back by permitting and this high cost base. The SEIA does its job looking after the 90%, so it's mostly focused on utilities, and that's what their board's focused on. And so we either have to, as an industry, get in touch with SEIA, every single one of us, and say, you need to represent solar properly. We want to be a third of your budget. We want that budget to focus on fundamentally solving for SolarAPP and automated permitting. Or we need a new separate body. And some of the state associations like CALSA are fantastic, and they represent distributed incredibly well, solar and storage. Ultimately, your state association is probably a great place for you to focus on for SolarAPP, because state policy is basically more likely to happen unless Musk comes through with the Doge play on federal policy.
Right.
So yeah, get in touch with your local chapter, your local solar storage association. And then the other thing I'd say is there's an organization, Permit Power. So the URL permitpower.org. That is a nonprofit that has been created, that I've been involved with and supported as well, to support the advocacy for SolarAPP. So until we have a proper industry representative, permitpower.org is the place to go to get involved and ask for their help getting your city and your state to do this. So if you support SolarAPP through that and you have OpenSolar, I would say, it sounds like a sales pitch, but it's free. It's amazing technology. It can help you get a very efficient process and help you scale your business. Those two things, I think, are the biggest solutions for contractors in the States today.
Cool. Yeah, I'd never heard of Permit Power. So check that out, permitpower.org. And I completely agree. Join your state organization. And sometimes there are regional organizations also, like the Mid-Atlantic Solar and Storage Association.
Yeah.
Here in Illinois, it's the Illinois Solar and Storage Association. So join and support and participate. It is only through our collective power as an industry that we're going to make change. And it's not enough to just be a good installer. That helps, okay? It is a little bit of the Wild West. There is good, bad, ugly going on in the solar industry. There are some bad actors. But for the most part, we're good companies, good people doing the right thing for consumers. But we also need to change the landscape and change the playing field. And as we pointed out early in the show, we could lower the cost at least by half of the installation here in the United States, and that would skyrocket the adoption curve. Oh my God, that would just be a game changer.
And we got to believe, right? We just need to believe that it can be done. We collectively just need to, be strong and believe and get it done.
I love it. Well, I want to thank Birchy for coming on the show, the co-founder and CEO of OpenSolar, and check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Please give us a rating and a review. Tell a friend about the show. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love hearing from my listeners. We have a very robust YouTube channel. Follow us on YouTube. And see me at a trade show. I'm going to all the major trade shows, the regional RE Pluses, etc. We have 3 major shows here in Illinois that I'll be at. I'll be at NABCEP this year, so please connect with me at a live conference. And with that, Birchy, how can our listeners find you?
So yeah, you can get me on LinkedIn. It's probably the best. And visit ebirchy.com. There's a lot of, policy work and the S-Curve video at that website. And check out opensolar.com, obviously, to see how we can help you for your business side too.
Wonderful. Well, I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar and storage. Thank you so much, Birchy.
Thanks, Tim. Have a good day.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 3-phase string inverter, with over 8 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more.